morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're on page 255 of your student journal, and our objective or goal for the day is, today I will plot coordinates that reflect over the x-axis, y-axis, or both axes. Oops, sorry, I made a mistake there. Both axes. Okay, so let's read that again and kind of talk about the big parts. Today I will plot coordinates that reflect over the x-axis, the y-axis, or both axes. So let's talk about what this word reflect means. So looking at our vocabulary, our first word is line of symmetry. So it's a line that divides a figure in such a way that it can be folded along the line into matching parts. So for our purpose today, the line of symmetry is either going to be the x-axis, the y-axis, or both axes. So a reflection is a symmetrical point across the x or y-axis or both axes. Okay, so let's look at kind of the example here before I show you an example. So this tells us that point A, which is right here, and point B, which is right here, is reflected over the x-axis right here. Because if I was to fold this paper over the x-axis, these 2 points would touch. That is what that is telling us. Okay, it also tells us point Y, which is right there, and point Z is reflected over both the x and the y axes, because to make those touch, what we'd have to do is we'd have to fold it diagonal. So it'd have to be folded diagonally to make those two touch. Okay, so let's look at a couple of these that I'm going to model for you, and then we'll do some together. So here is my first problem. And my first problem says, use the coordinate grid on the facing page to model input model number 1. And then I have A is 4, 0, and B is -4, 0. So I already put the page here, so it's ready to go. Okay, so remember when we plot these, what I always like to remember is that this is my x and that's my y. So this is my x and that's my y. Okay, so if I'm going to plot A, my x is 4, and my y is 0, which would be right here. So that is A. Okay, if I'm going to plot B, my x is -4, and my y is 0, which would be right here. Okay, so if I wanted these two to touch, if I wanted to see what the line of symmetry is, and I actually wanted them to touch, what I would need to do would be I would be folding the paper over the y-axis. So if I folded it on the y-axis, these two would touch. So my answer for this would be point A and B are reflected over the y-axis, because this is where I would do the fold. Okay, let's look at another one. Here's my next one. And this one says, again, find and label points G, which is 6, 3, and H, which is 6, -3. Okay, so let's look at where I would put these. Okay, so my first one is 6, 3, and 6, 3, this is my x and that's my y. So on my x, I'm going to find my 6, and on my y, I'm going to find my 3, and they meet right here. So that is where G is. Okay, then I'm going to find 6, -3. So my x is still 6, but now my y is -3, which means it's right here. So this is where H is. Okay, so where would I fold this? To make these two touch, to show that they're symmetrical. Well, if I folded it here on the x-axis, these 2 points would touch. So what I would say is point G and point H are reflected over the x-axis. They're reflected over the x-axis. Okay, so that's what I could say about that. Okay, let's look at one more that I'm going to do. It actually has 2 problems on here. Okay, so my first one says A is 5, -1, and B is -5, 1. They want me to plot those, say what quadrant they are in, and then they also want me to say what they're reflected over. Okay, so A, my x is 5 and my y is 1. So on my x line I find my 5 and on my y I find -1. So it's right here. This is where A is. And let's mark my quadrants. This is 1, 2, 3, and 4, because I start with the positive quadrant and I go counterclockwise. So A is in quadrant 4. B is -5 on my x and +1, which would be right there. So that is in quadrant 2. Okay. Now, where would I fold this? If I folded it on the y-axis, they wouldn't touch. If I folded it on the x-axis, they wouldn't touch. I would have to fold this one on both axes to make it touch. So I would have to fold it this way and then fold it again. So this is reflected on both axes. Okay, let's do one more together. So H is at -6, -3. So -6 on my x and -3 on my y would be right here. So that's H. And that's in quadrant 3. And then 6, -3 is right here. So that is in K, and that's in quadrant 4. Okay, so if I fold it along my y axes, these two are symmetrical. So this one are reflected on the y-axis. Okay, so let's try some of these together now that I've shown you a few of them. Okay, we are on page 257 to start with. Okay, so here is our first one we're going to be doing on page 257. I'm going to zoom out so we can see it a little better and see all of it. Okay, so my first problem says H is at 2, 3. So my x is 2 and my y is 3. So my x is 2 and my y is 3, which would be right here. And that is H. And my z is, my x is still 2, but now my y is -3. So here is z. Okay. Oh, and let's mark our quadrants. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so H was in quadrant 1, Z was in quadrant 4, and they are reflected over, we'd have to fold it right here on the x-axis. Okay, let's do number 2 together. P is at 5, 2, so my x is 5, and my y is 2, so here's P. And Q, my x is -5 and my y is 2. So -5 and 2. And this would be where Q is. Okay, P was in quadrant 1 and Q is in quadrant 2. And to make them touch, we'd have to fold it right here on the y-axis. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, you have the rest of Unit 4 and Unit 5 to work on. Have a great day. Bye.